is only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This week's podcast will be in two distinct parts. That's mainly because, first of all, I wanted to see if I could get some answers for two people who've written in to me. And secondly, I very much hope and expect to be able to continue discussing what happens to us when we die. And I had some very interesting conversations, as you know, with Kevin and Martin. And I believe from some dreams I was having last night that I've got another person who's going to come along and help me with the next phase. But before I actually do that, I want to invoke my angel, Titan, because I think he is probably best placed to help me answer the questions that both Joe and Rebecca have asked. So before I contact Titan, I'll just quickly give you an idea of what these questions were. In the case of Joe, and I won't use his last name, obviously, he was very, very curious about things that are paranormal, and he very much obviously enjoys listening to my podcast, but he wants to know that as he was raised Catholic, and he never really enjoyed it, he seemed to think that Catholicism was a bunch of made-up stories. He'd had family members pass on, and he was wondering if they have any messages to send him at all. And he wondered if I could perhaps ask Titan if perhaps they would communicate somehow. He obviously realizes that that's not really my bag. I'm not generally a medium who sits opposite someone. I've never done that. Well, that's not true. I have done it once or twice, but I certainly haven't done it for years. And so I don't generally have that type of gift, I think, of being able to speak to someone in front of me. But certainly I've had plenty of communication for other people through Titan, so I can certainly try that. But it was his cousin passed away 20 years ago, and his dad passed away this year. His mother also passed away 19 years ago. All his grandparents have also passed. So I think what Joe wants to know, since he feels that the podcast makes a lot of sense to him, he wants to know if I could contact anyone. So Joe, most definitely, I will in a few minutes. I will see if I can get hold of Titan, and see if he can say anything. No promises, but it's always fun to try. And the second shout out there is for Rebecca. Rebecca's also in the United States, and she thanks me for doing this podcast, and I really appreciate that. It's so nice to hear from you. She's finished all the episodes, and she was particularly taken by the episode that talked about this hybrid machine that perhaps humans will become in 1,000 years' time. I remember that very well. As I said, I never listen to my podcasts. Literally from the minute I record it, that's it. I just walk away because of my imposter syndrome, but also I feel in a way very, very self-conscious about what comes out of my mouth when I'm doing this. So I really wouldn't want to listen to myself again. But I do remember that episode, and I think it was pretty amazing. So Rebecca wanted to ask a couple of questions. What role do mind-altering drugs play in reaching through to different dimensions? And the second question, do people with mental disorders or differences like schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder have a propensity for communicating with the dead or entities from different dimensions? And she also mentions she has plenty more questions, which is fantastic. Please send them in. I will do my best then. Give me a few moments. It'll be a few seconds to you, and hopefully I can reach out to Titan and see if he can give me some answers. Okay, I'm back, and Titan is here as well, and Titan wishes to deal with Rebecca's questions first, because that is, I believe, going to be the easiest thing to do. So Titan, thank you very much for coming back. I think it's been a few weeks since you've been here, but I appreciate your time. And as we're doing this in two parts, I'm recording this, as you know, on Tuesday, and tomorrow I will continue with the rest of the podcast. But I wanted to see if I could help these two individuals with their questions. So perhaps, Titan, you know the questions that Rebecca asked. What role do mind-altering drugs play in reaching through to different dimensions? First of all, Titan is mentioning to me, she's saying general anesthetic, that is quite an interesting subject. When somebody has an operation and they are put to sleep with a general anesthetic, it's quite interesting for people to understand what happens to your consciousness and to your soul. Titan says that in most cases people do not remember anything when they wake up from a general anesthetic. And she's saying also that that's very normal for people who dream as well. Very often people, when they are in a dream state, do not remember much when they wake up in the morning. Although that I know myself, this is me talking now, I know myself that I can remember more and more if I practice, or maybe keep some sort of dream diary. And I know another friend of mine recently told me that she woke up in the morning having had very, very vivid dreams about a particular demon, but couldn't really remember in the morning enough to be able to really explain what had happened. And she was very frustrated because she wished that she had remembered. But Titan is mentioning to me that the states are the same. When your consciousness is either artificially altered by taking a form of anesthetic, or for that matter, she says, a drug that can change perception. It's very similar to being in the dream state, where you are deliberately closing down your conscious mind in order to be able to sleep. And at that time, that's when she says we all get together. But she wants to also mention that it is very key that at no point is all our consciousness that exists in the entity that is the person, at no point is there 100% consciousness in us. From the moment we're born, there are varying degrees of consciousness and consciousness energy that are injected, she says, into the baby, the fetus, that will eventually develop into the human. But not all of the consciousness comes to the earth experience. She says there is no fixed rule. There is sometimes very little consciousness, or there can be quite a lot of consciousness, but never 100% of the consciousness is transferred from your main entity. I think she's actually using this expression now. She's saying the oversoul, which is something I have read about before. That could be the getting together of all those entities that make you up. She's saying everything that you are is your oversoul, and parts of your soul, your oversoul, can be individualized in separate existences. I think I've heard that before now, Titan. So Titan is saying that at no point does all the consciousness from the oversoul come into one body. A portion of it does. And that portion can, to a very small extent, return back to the oversoul at times of deep sleep, but also if you are taking consciousness-altering substances. Now, she's saying that there is obviously a danger that if you're taking mind-altering substances, this is an artificial separation of the soul from the body, which can cause complications. And she's saying, of course, it can even cause death, because you can actually harm the physical body in the process, and at that point, the soul will leave the body. So it is quite a dangerous thing to do. Equally, it can cause problems, because if you take a mind-altering drug, you don't just also affect the mind, you will affect the body. And you have things such as addictions, she says, but you also have the fact that if you cause a problem to the body, again, you may, she's using the word pollute the body to such an extent that it affects the continuation of that soul energy inhabiting that body, which he says could also ultimately lead to death. But also you're opening up your soul, therefore, to the invitation of other energy to come in to make up for the lack of your own soul energy, which temporarily comes back to the oversoul. So yes, she's saying the danger is of taking a mind-altering drug is that you can end up vacating, your soul can end up vacating your body to a certain extent for the period of time that you're taking this drug, which will mean that not only will that cause a problem because the soul may find it difficult to come back, but other entities can also enter into your body. She's saying not so much take up residence, or she's using the word possession, but she says those cases where people believe people are possessed, she says, happens because other entities' consciousness can get in and mixed up with the person's consciousness, which is not actively participating in the body for various reasons, which taking drugs is one of them. All right, so yes, so you're saying that really taking mind-altering drugs is a very dangerous thing to do, because it's actually causing your consciousness to leave and leaving a sort of vacuum behind. And she says, yes, that's exactly the point she's making. So it enables you to have different experiences, she says, but in fact you're not reaching different dimensions, Rebecca. What you're doing is allowing other entities into your consciousness, and you're experiencing their experiences. And their experiences could be living a life that's simultaneous to yours, or not living a life at all, or just be energy consciousness that is around all things at all times and represents certain memories or certain very, very important events or experiences that have happened. So she's saying it's not, please don't think that when you're taking mind-altering drugs that you are reaching different dimensions. You're not. And then the second part of the question was, do people with mental disorders or differences like schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, have a propensity for communicating with the dead or entities from different dimensions? Can you answer that question as well? She's saying that the mental disorders and multiple personality disorders, these are physical disorders of the brain. They are nothing to do with the soul or the soul energy. These things just can cause a problem with the soul being able to do its job and to be able to habit or cohabit in a person with a physical disease. This can, again, shorten life, or this can cause great confusion because, again, the person who may have a multiple personality disorder is not communicating necessarily with dead or other entities from other dimensions, but nearly always is actually allowing, because of the confusion and because of the vacuum created by this, you're allowing other entities to come into your consciousness and to some extent take over. And to be honest, she's saying the diseases like schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder are just that. They are not entities from other dimensions. They are people who are either living lives now, who are subconsciously passing that information over to you, that energy to you, and it's inhabiting your brain, or you're allowing negative energy or positive energy. You're allowing energy from other things, other events, objects, animals. She's saying all these things to come into you. It's like you've opened the door, and they can then take over your personality. And so it affects your physical body, and that then affects your behavior. It's nothing to do with dead people or different dimensions. Oh, that was very interesting. I wonder if I could ask then, Titan, if taking drugs and people with mental disorders are really nothing to do with different dimensions or what happens to us when we die. What is the purpose of that? Why would that happen? Titan is saying there isn't a great purpose to it. It's just the function of how human bodies work, and also how spiritual advancement takes place through the learning of a physical life. However, if you interfere with that by having an artificially constructed experience caused by a drug, or if you have a mental disorder, which is a physical disorder of the brain, that will interfere with the normal the normal soul life experience and push it out to a greater extent. Not completely, that'll only happen at death, but push it out to such an extent that by natural desire of the human body and the way that the interplay between the soul and the body works, it allows a vacuum to be created, which will then, she's saying, almost suck in available energy to fill up that space. And that available energy is not dedicated to that person. It's an invasion of that person, and can cause all sorts of issues. Okay, I think that's pretty much answering that question. I think I'll leave it there. I hope that helped with you, Rebecca. Okay, I just had a little pause there because I would like to ask you, Titan, you've obviously heard the message from Joe. He's very keen on perhaps talking to anyone who he's known who's passed. I know this is probably quite a big ask. All right, so immediately Titan's coming to me and saying that there's a lady there, a lady's energy exists, and she says her name is Daphne. It sounds like Daphne to me. And so Daphne is there, and I don't know what relationship she is, but she says that she's interested in passing a message to Joe. I don't know, this is a very strange feeling. I'm seeing boxing matches, boxing gloves, and for some reason I'm actually being reminded of a very famous boxing match that existed between Muhammad Ali and I think it was Joe Foreman. I think they called it the Rumble in the Jungle or something, or it was in the Philippines, and I think it was one of the most famous boxing matches. I'm being shown that, and I'm being encouraged to mention that, and to say, for whatever reason, this also seems, this boxing and this match, it seems to be very important, either to Daphne or to you, Joe, or and the actual sport of boxing is coming through. Now, I'm just being told that boxing has given tremendous pleasure to people that you've known. I'm not talking necessarily about you, Joe, but to the people who are around you. There's a lot of talking of boxing. I'm also getting a sense of gambling and betting on horses, and maybe to a certain extent racing horses, and I'm feeling that very, very strongly as well. I don't know. I got a feeling in a way that might have been something to do with the grandparents. Maybe they were involved in horses in some way, maybe breeding of horses. I'm not too sure, or maybe they just enjoyed a flutter at a weekend. But I'm getting a very strong feeling about horses as well. Let me see what else I can get. Two very strong things came through my mind just now: aeroplanes and hot air balloons. I have absolutely no idea why that, but Titan is giving me that image of hot air balloons and aeroplanes. But it's not. It's more like an interest in amateur flying or hot air balloons. I'm getting this image of this balloon, and I get this impression of being in a hot air balloon and looking down at the countryside and being and marveling at it and feeling so thrilled to see that wonderful experience. Somebody obviously there was very, very keen on the ability to fly as well. I got a very strong image of somebody hunting in terms of knives. And this person was showing me, dressed up in a sort of hunting outfit, was showing me a knife and showing me the sharpening of that knife on a stone next to a river. A very outdoorsy sort of person, a person who clearly liked living in the wilderness somewhere, possibly in the United States, I don't know. But yes, would actually hunt. And strangely enough, is also telling me that they would actually kill animals and skin them, and would do it for food, rather than just the pure enjoyment of killing another animal. Okay, and I'm also getting the impression that this person was actually ex-military, and I think this person is also showing me a gun, an army gun, and is also showing me a uniform. And I think somebody here was most definitely in the military, and very much enjoyed also hunting as a sport, which is quite interesting. Okay, Titan, I think that's pretty good. That's enough for now. We're already over halfway through, and I would like to reconvene this tomorrow and spend the remaining half, if I can, contacting the person who was communicating with me last night in my dreams. And I have to say up front, the reason I want to do this over 2 days is that this, I think, is going to be quite emotional for me, because I'm not, again, sure whether I've mentioned this in a podcast or not. I will mention it now, and then I don't have to mention it again tomorrow. But when I was very young, and I began to realize that I had certain psychic gifts, I explained it to my mother, and we were sitting there having a cup of tea, as I seem to remember, and a biscuit, and it just suddenly came to me that I had a sister. Now, I don't have a sister, but I really thought I had a sister, but this sister was not alive anymore. And it then sort of started coming through me that it was actually my mother's child. And that somehow at one point this child had the pregnancy terminated. And however, she was living in the spirit world. Now, my mother immediately denied it, but then burst into tears and accepted that this did actually happen, and she had an abortion, there's no judgment in that, but that's what she did. And she said it was because she'd already had 2 children, she was about to start a university degree, it wasn't going to fit in with her lifestyle, and she had to make a very difficult decision to terminate the pregnancy. Well, last night, finally, my sister came through to me, and she's even given me a name. She says I can call her Miriam. And she's going to come through most definitely tomorrow, and she's going to help me understand where Kevin gives off, where he leaves off, in terms of the guiding he does about helping people understand their lives. And I believe Kevin hands over to Miriam, and Miriam as I understand it, is a person who's never had a life and never will have a life, but has done this before, has gone into, has allowed energy from her soul to go into a baby, and she'll explain more of this tomorrow, with the full knowledge that this baby is not going to reach full term. And it was explained to me last night by Miriam that this is something that many, many souls do, not just because it has to be done, because there are an awful lot of cases where children never reach full term, but it is also a choice that they make for various reasons, and I think that's going to be explained to me tomorrow. So that's where we are. Again, this will just be a couple of seconds for you, but for me, it's going to be 24 hours. So it's 24 hours later, and I'm back, and I've been contacted by Miriam really since yesterday, and although I've not really had any great direct conversation with her, as I'm hoping to now, I know she's here, and I hope that she's going to answer a few questions about her purpose, and how does that relate to me as well, which of course I'm fascinated about. So Miriam, thank you very much for coming by, and it's obviously slightly delicate because this is quite personal, but tell me exactly who are you and what is your purpose? Miriam says that she says hello, and she understands that it's probably a little bit of a shock to me that she's showing her presence. This is not the first time, she says, but you're probably not quite aware of it. But one of the things that she does in her capacity as a guide is to assist groups of people, groups of souls, do two main things, she says. The first is she assists people in the process of choosing a life after a period of time. And the second part of her responsibility, which she says is just, she's one of many, many people who do this, but she actually assists the birth of the soul into the human body at the very first stages. Okay, so I have to ask you a question first of all, because why did I have this feeling, probably when I was in my late teens, that I had a sister? Because clearly you're not my sister, but I felt I had a sister. She said that I was picking up the energy field that she was giving. She was not. I was not picking up her energy directly. I was picking it up through my mother. My mother, she had residual energy from Miriam because of the experience that had happened to her many years before that. And I was picking up that energy because that energy is always left behind. Okay, so where do you come into my life? Are you really a sister who was never born? How does that work? She says, well, first of all, there's two mistakes in what you're saying. She said that she has never had the desire to be born and has never been born. And she is called upon at particular times with particular entities to assist a person who is going to have a child but is not going to carry that child to full term. She says, obviously, as a human, in many cases, people are not even aware that they're not going to carry a child to full term. But obviously, where she is, it's all known and it's all been planned. And in the case of, she said, your mother, my mother, this became obvious, and she enabled the transformation from the soul to come into the fetus, but not to stay for very long, because not only, she says, is the human brain not developed very well until much later in a pregnancy. It's also it often does not come into a baby until almost a month or so before birth. But in the particular case of your mother, we're talking about a couple of months of pregnancy, maybe even less, and that it isn't really necessary for her to go into the fetus in order to be able to produce a soul for the child, because it's never going to develop into a full human. However, it is necessary to be part of that process, and in order to assist the mother as well as the potential child. She's saying the second thing you probably didn't quite get right is that it isn't a child, and therefore you didn't have a sister per se, but you have a relationship, she says, to me, because I was part of that process that enabled that fetus to have a partial soul, and also to enable that whole process to give comfort and guidance to the person, your mother, who was going to go through that process. And this, she says, happens every single time a human life is born. And normally the soul will stay and turn into a person. But in the case of a premature death or an abortion or something like that, it's already decided, obviously, she says, that I'm not going to stay there for very long. So I would not have stayed in that body had it come to full term. She says, I am there like a group of people who specialize in the sort of process of being there for a short period, which is necessary, but then being ready to come out pretty soon afterwards. But always there's a little residual energy that's left behind. Okay, so Miriam, this whole thought that I had for all these years about me having a sister growing up in spirit is not the case, really. No, it's not the case. But she says that I've had a very close relationship with me, and she's been involved in my life in many respects. And she is a guide that has been assigned to me, and my soul is very familiar with her. And she offers as much guidance as she can, and gets involved in situations such as children who never make it full term, and offering her guidance and love in order to make it easier for the families, and as well as the little soul that is there temporarily. And that is something that she's been doing for a long time, and finds it of particular interest again. Okay, that's interesting to hear, Miriam. I would love to then talk to you a bit about what are your other purposes, and why you've been basically chafing at the bit to come and speak to me for a few days. What have you got to tell us about the processes after what we've heard so far? She's saying to me that you've heard from Kevin most recently, and there is that chance that you get to go back into a life with a piece of the energy that was not only resident in that human body before it died, but also with the knowledge, the full knowledge of everything that is you, the oversoul, if you like. And you can go back and you can look at various aspects that your other educational guides have directed you to, in order for you to be able to see, had you made different choices, could different outcomes happen, and could better things happen? Could your spiritual development have been improved with different choices. Once that process is complete, and which can take a long time in your times, but obviously time is immaterial here. We can see, she says, everything, the past, the present, the future, as just one now. But after that process is complete and the soul feels that it's had enough education, and most importantly, of course, your spirit guides who are there to guide you and help you and develop you also feel that you've managed to learn as much as you can. There are various choices that can be made, and she says this is where she comes into play, because she is now one of the spirits who have never incarnated as an earth life. The nearest they get is to come down to, as she did in the case of my mother, to assist with a human body that is actually never going to be born. That is the nearest that she's ever come to having an earth existence. She says that she has had a number of lives in different places which are not relevant to the planet Earth, and by agreement, she's saying, we're not really going to be talking about that with you, because that is knowledge that we don't feel we should be sharing with you. It's not relevant to your Earth life. However, what is relevant, and the reason why she wants to come now and talk to me, she says, is that at the point that you have finished that spiritual research, and she's actually saying almost like an auditing process, you get the chance to do a range of things. In many cases, a spirit will rest for a while and will return to a place that they have always returned to, which is a place which is of great comfort to them, which could be a manifestation of a particular life or a particular place, and with particular friends and people that you have reincarnated with many times before. Or, if you like, and a lot of people do that, a lot of souls do this, they will almost instantaneously transfer some of their energy to a new earth life. And this is very much what she's involved in, and finds it very interesting, is to help guide the soul as to what life they may wish to inhabit next, and for what reasons. She's telling me that the choices are obviously infinite, but more often than not, at the point that a soul still wishes to incarnate as a human being, it is because something is yet to be learned. Some process hasn't happened quite right, and by going back into a physical body, not only can it learn, but it can also perhaps assist other people. It's not just a selfish exercise, she says. Whenever we are reborn, we're not just thinking of ourselves as the only thing. We're also thinking about the interactions that we're going to have with other people, with other souls in our oversoul, and within other oversouls. So it's very much a participatory process, as well as an individual learning exercise. And if we want to take the case of somebody, she says, that I've worked with very recently, it was a person who had a short life, in terms of your understanding of a short life, and a number of things hadn't been experienced for various reasons. She's not wanting to go into that, but for particular reasons, the life wasn't fulfilled as it should be. So after a period of analysis and also adjusting to the mistakes that were made and the learnings that were made or not made, this particular entity decided to put some of its consciousness into a new child that would be born in a completely different environment from the environment that this person had recently had. In the case of this last episode, this person had been very wealthy, and had actually died in a car crash, and had not really learned some lessons, because she's saying for many times this particular soul has gone back to life and has died in car crashes, and for whatever reason, there didn't seem to be a huge development going on there. That sounds crazy. So her purpose was to assist this particular soul find a life where it would be easier for them to stop this kind of almost routine behavior, this behavior that seems to constantly repeat itself, in order to live a life that is longer and more fulfilling and has a wider experience. And that's what she ended up doing. And they actually found the possibility to reincarnate this soul in a boy in a very small African community, where his life would be completely different and the experiences would be completely different from what he had actually experienced before. I'd like to ask a question, Miriam. So when you reincarnate, I presume you can reincarnate into any time in Earth's history, past, present, and future. Is that the case? She said, yes. Obviously, we are aware. We are able to see the entire scan of everything. And many people will look at life and they'll think, well, I want to go back to an Earth time, because that is the only form of time that a spirit will ever have an experience of, and that's when we're bound by that on Earth or in another planetary system. And they may choose to go back thousands of years ago in your terms, or maybe thousands of years into the future in your terms, or maybe just a few years either side, or even repeat the same period of time that they were in a previous life, but in a different life, a different body, a different, she's saying, a different experience of life. And this is something that she will work with the soul, and not just alone, but with many other guides, in order to help that entity decide what will happen. It's also quite interesting because she says that it's not quite so straightforward, that you decide to have another life and immediately another life is available for you. Because at any one time, there could be many entities that are wishing to become a human in some form or other. But there is actually no particular human available yet. So there is, in a way, she says, you could say a kind of a waiting list. But there are, of course, preferences that are made for various reasons, because the entity and the guides believe there is a bit more need or purpose than some other soul, or particularly because of an interest the soul has, and the availability that comes about is suited to that soul immediately rather than other souls. And so those choices can also be made, and things can happen very, very quickly. Okay, so what happens then at the point that you have found the appropriate woman or baby in order to inject the soul in? What happens then? Miriam says that there is a very complicated process that takes place, and we will discuss that probably in another episode. But for now, she's very happy to say that at the point that a soul is ready, and that takes a lot of preparation, which we will talk about, it can be almost simultaneously injected into the baby's into the baby that is in the woman's stomach, and they can then start working simultaneously to integrate the soul with that baby before birth. And it'll be a process of back and forth and learning together and blending before the point of birth, because at the point of birth, And for only a few months afterwards, there can be this conscious interplay between the human and the spirit. But eventually, due to the nature of being human and the need not to be dominated by knowledge of the spirit world, the human takes over. And in most cases, the child pretty much forgets very quickly that it is far, far more than just that child that's the soul's inhabiting at that particular point. Okay. And she says also, children, you'll probably find, are very much more susceptible to psychic phenomenon and being more receptive to that because they have so recently been connected to their souls more consciously. But as the children get a bit older and human behavior and modes of behavior and thought and speech and everything else take over, the child forgets more and more. Not all children do, she says, and those children will probably continue to develop in psychic ways and have psychic abilities. But a lot of children do completely forget. Okay, thank you, Miriam. So Miriam is saying to me that that's really enough for this week. And will you come back next week, Miriam, and continue telling us about how this all works? She said yes, she will come next week, but she's going to bring a couple more spirit helpers who work with her to go through the process of choosing the correct person, the correct life that you wish to have, and how that actual process takes place. Okay, well, that really does sound amazing. So I look forward to that. Thank you very much, Miriam, for coming through. I think I'll leave you alone for a week, and I'm sure you'll leave me alone for a week. It's been quite an intense few days for me. I think I need a rest as well. But thank you all for listening. And again, thank you for coming through, Miriam, and see you next week.